I believe weapons of war have no place on our streets.
Her plan is to disarm law-abiding Americans, abolishing the Second Amendment, and leaving only the bad guys and terrorists with guns.
Donald says guns should be allowed in nightclubs that serve alcohol.
In those rooms, whether it's San Bernardino or Paris or wherever, and you had guns, boom, you had guns, you would have had a much different outcome, folks.
The NRA's position reminds me of negotiating with the Iranians.
We are going to save our Second Amendment, which is totally under siege.
All right. The candidates talking about guns. Now, as we run up to the election, and we're there, of course, look at this. A recent survey, it shows that 16% of people had planned to buy a gun before the election. That's a lot of people. Yeah. Come on in, David Keene. He's the former NRA President. David, welcome to the program. Good to have you here, sir.
It's a pleasure to be with you.
May I suggest that the biggest threat to the gun industry, if I can put it like that, is the idea, Hillary's plan, to impose liability on gun makers. I think that just put them out of business. Big threat?
Oh, that is a big threat, and Congress has prevented that. If you listen to her, you'd think that somehow gun makers were exempt from the same kinds of lawsuits that, say, an automaker faces. That's not the case. What Congress has said is that you can't sue a gun maker who's produced a legal product that does not break down, that's not badly manufactured, because somebody misuses it. That would be tantamount to, for example, holding an auto manufacturer responsible if somebody takes a car and runs somebody over. You go after the person who does wrong, not the manufacturer. What she'd like to do, and the gun industry is in a sense a fragile industry. A lot of the major makers have gone bankrupt several times. Before this law was passed, there were a lot of lawsuits against gun makers on the basis that she'd like to do it. They weren't designed to win. They were designed to try and bankrupt gun manufacturers and prevent the manufacture of firearms. That's what that's all about.
A bit like tobacco. All right, David, gun control is on the ballot in these states, California, Nevada, Washington, and Maine. I'm looking closely at Maine. Voters there are going to have to decide whether or not to expand background checks. As I understand it, in Maine, any transfer of a gun, like from a father to a son or a daughter, would require a background check. That seems highly intrusive. Is it going to pass in Maine?
To say the very least, it's highly intrusive. What's happened is because of Mr. Bloomberg and the gun control lobby's failure to win in legislatures, to win in the courts, to win in Congress, they've tried to focus on narrow referenda questions that sound good to start with. And when you ask people, do you think that people ought to have a background check when they buy a gun, they say sure. They don't get into these details. But indeed, many of these proposals would make it a felony for somebody to give a gun to his grandson, in many cases even an air rifle, to have a transfer in the field. Let's say you and I are hunting and you want to try my gun, and if something like this passes and I hand it to you, we both become criminals as a result.
Oh, good Lord.
That sort of thing accomplishes no reasonable purpose related to safety or anything else. It's merely another attempt to harass gun owners and to put something over, if you will, on the voters. I think if this passes, there'll be a revolt against it, and it will be changed within a matter of years.
I've got one more for you, and this is from Washington State. The issue on the ballot there, if someone close to you thinks that you are dangerous or mentally unstable, a judge can take your gun away on the say-so of that person close to you. How do you feel about that?
Well, we've always felt that in terms of, first of all, you have to deal with people as individuals. If there's a showing of dangerousness and there's due process, and there's an adjudication that an individual is in fact dangerous, that's one thing. But in a lot of these cases, this being one, they say, well, you know, if your neighbor says that you're a hothead, maybe we should be able to take your gun away from you. And that is not the American way. It's not something that'll stand up, and we're opposed to it, always have been. Deal with people as individuals and always allow due process.
David Keene, former president, NRA. Thanks for joining us, sir. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Always a pleasure. Thank you. Okay.